James Lacey's missed appointment. Agatha Raisin mystery. Agatha Raisin braces to bask in WI glory, until James Lacey doesn't show, and Carsley's smiles turn sharp enough to draw blood. By morning, a woman lies dead in a Mercester tea room, and J.L. sits in her diary. So Agatha's public humiliation becomes a very private mystery. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Agatha Raisin began the evening in a state of triumphant self-importance. Of course James will be marvellous, she had told half the village over the past week. His talk will be the highlight of the WI calendar. She had repeated this so often that she almost believed she had personally coached him in modern warfare, rather than merely badgered him into agreeing. Now, standing at the front of the WI hall with its rows of metal chairs and smell of freshly boiled urn water, she felt the pleasant stretch of anticipation. Members were filing in with that mixture of nosy curiosity and veiled competition that Carsley women brought to any event. Doris Simpson was already bickering with another member about the placement of the folding table, and Mrs. Bloxby was diplomatically smoothing over the dispute with quiet grace. Hodge had disgraced her within the first 2 minutes. Agatha had brought him in a wicker basket, thinking it would make her look softer, more approachable. Hodge disagreed. The moment the lid unlatched, he shot out like a furry torpedo and stalked under the rows of chairs, brushing stockings and unsettling the more delicate ankles. Doris shrieked loudly enough to make the urn hiss in sympathy. "Agatha, dear," Mrs. Bloxby murmured, leaning close. "Perhaps he's just exploring." "He's exploring how to ruin my evening," Agatha muttered, sweeping her eyes across the hall for a glimpse of James. He should be here by now. But James was not there. The chair at the front, set neatly beside the lectern, remained stubbornly empty. The clock on the wall, its hands shaped like little ears of wheat, ticked towards the advertised start time. Agatha felt her stomach tighten. She glared at the door as though she could summon him through it. The WI women, sensing blood in the water, were settling into the kind of eager silence that heralded future gossip. Mrs. Mason whispered loudly to her neighbour, "Perhaps he's preparing a dramatic entrance." Agatha snapped. "James does not do dramatic entrances." Doris, who had by now recovered from her encounter with Hodge, said, "Well, he's doing something, isn't he? Because he's not here." Agatha plastered on a smile that felt as brittle as a sugar biscuit. He must have been delayed. Perfectly ordinary, perfectly expected. But the minutes slid past with treacherous speed. The urn bubbled, the chairs creaked as women shifted, whispering behind their hymn book-like WI agendas. By the 15th minute, Agatha felt her throat tighten with humiliation. She could practically hear the whisper racing through Carsley. Poor Agatha Raisin, stood up in public, by James Lacey no less. Mrs. Bloxby stepped forward gently. "Perhaps," she said, "we might enjoy a discussion evening instead. Everyone could share a memory of, well, modern life." Charles Fraith chose that moment to arrive, breezing in with a careless smile and the faint scent of aftershave that came from having nothing serious to do all day. "Sorry all, lost track of time. Is James dazzling everyone already?" Agatha's expression answered for her. "Oh," Charles said, surveying the room as though expecting James to materialize behind the biscuit tray. "Well, I could fill in if you like. Got a smashing story about a hunt ball in '93. "No," Agatha hissed. But Charles was already launching into a rambling anecdote involving a runaway horse, a scandalous cousin, and a misplaced pair of trousers. The audience looked painfully entertained. By the time the evening ended, Agatha's dignity lay in shreds. Women filed past her on the way out with smiles a little too sweet, voices just a touch too kind. "Never mind, dear," one said. "Men forget things. Brains like sieves." Another murmured, "He must have had something terribly important come up." And the worst part was that they were enjoying every word. In the Red Lion afterwards, Charles bought her a gin. Agatha accepted it, though she would have preferred the entire bottle. The pub was warm, a haven of chatter and clinking glasses, but every whisper seemed to carry James's name. A man near the bar said, "Saw him this afternoon, you know. Looked in quite a hurry. Not like a chap who'd simply forgotten a talk." Someone else nodded. "He had a phone call this morning. Looked grim when he hung up. Said he had to dash to Mercester. Didn't say why." Agatha's humiliation hardened into suspicion. "Mercester," she said sharply. "Oh yes," said the man, tapping the side of his nose with irritating significance. Another appointment, apparently. Charles leaned close and murmured, "Probably a glamorous widow. James always did attract the pensive sort." He gave Agatha a playful nudge. "Don't look like that. Might be harmless." Agatha's glare could have melted the varnish on the table. "Widow? A glamorous one?" Charles lifted his pint. "Just idle speculation." Agatha could tell by the sparkle in his eyes that he enjoyed stirring the pot. By the time she marched home, she was seething. The village lanes glowed with lamplight, but Agatha hardly saw them. The humiliation, the whispers, Charles's teasing, all of it churned inside her like an overworked washing machine. At her cottage, she slammed the door hard enough to make Hodge, who had slipped out of the WI hall earlier and trotted home on his own, as if escorting himself, leap indignantly onto the sofa. "Oh, don't give me that look," she snapped, tossing her handbag aside. "You embarrassed me too." Hodge blinked with serene indifference, then hopped onto her lap the moment she sat down, kneading her skirt with determined paws. Agatha stroked him automatically, though her thoughts were far away. "James Lacey," she fumed, "marching off to Mercester for some mysterious appointment, not even a message for me, and leaving me to suffer the WI's glee." She lit a cigarette, not with melodrama, but with a single sharp click of the lighter, the kind of gesture that felt both decisive and bitter. The first curl of smoke drifted upward as she leaned back, staring at the ceiling. A glamorous widow, a secret appointment, a hurried departure no one could quite explain. She replayed the pub conversation, picking through every detail for the one piece that might tell her what James had really been doing. The thought came quietly, surprising her with its clarity. If James thinks he can make a fool of me, he is very much mistaken. Hodge, satisfied with his kneading, stretched luxuriously across her lap. Agatha tapped ash into a chipped saucer and gave a short, humourless laugh. "Well, Hodge," she said, "looks like we have a mystery whether we want one or not." Hodge blinked, unimpressed but warm against her. Agatha stubbed out the cigarette, her humiliation settling into a familiar, simmering determination. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find out exactly what James Lacey had been doing in Mercester. And if the truth involved a widowed beauty, Agatha would be the first to know, long before any wagging tongue in Carsley. With that vow stiffening her spine, she rose to switch off the kitchen light. Hodge padded after her, tail high, claiming the last word simply by being loved. Hodge had chosen the morning to express his artistic temperament. Agatha walked into the kitchen and stopped dead. Her ashtray lay upside down, grey smuts scattered across the freshly laundered tablecloth like a miniature volcanic eruption. Hodge sat beside it with an air of mild surprise, as though the ash had simply fallen from the heavens while he slept. "Oh, marvellous," Agatha snapped. "Just what I needed. A domestic disaster to start the day." Hodge blinked, unimpressed, then began washing his paw with ostentatious innocence. Agatha snatched up the ashtray, shook the cloth with unnecessary vigour, and muttered under her breath about men, cats, and the general treachery of the universe. She had not slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw James's empty chair at the WI hall, surrounded by rows of smirking villagers. If gossip had a physical form, the hall would still be dripping with it. Today, she told herself, she would show them all that she was utterly unfazed, entirely breezy, practically floating. With this lie fixed firmly in mind, she marched to the village shop. The bell above the door jingled the moment she entered, as if announcing her humiliation. Mrs. Mason, Doris, and two other professional lingerers turned toward her with the gleeful synchronization of vultures spotting a wounded rabbit. "Morning, Agatha," Mrs. Mason said, sweet as treacle. "Rough night after the mix-up?" "No mix-up," Agatha said crisply. "James had an appointment. Perfectly ordinary." "Oh," Doris brightened at once. "Not with you, then?" Agatha grabbed a basket with unnecessary force. "He had business elsewhere." Mrs. Mason leaned toward the others. "Funny sort of business, leaving you to face everyone alone." "Yes," murmured another woman, "and looking so purposeful, too. I saw him yesterday in Mercester, hurrying like anything, not the sort of hurrying a man does when he's forgotten a little talk." Agatha paused mid-orange selection. "Mercester?" "Oh, yes," the woman continued, "and he wasn't alone, mind you. Very elegant woman with him. Dark hair, good coat. Definitely not local." Doris nodded solemnly, though her eyes shone with delight. "I heard about her as well. Verity Montfort, taken a furnished place near Evesham, doing something frightfully noble with a soldier's charity. Agatha felt her mouth go dry. James, with a dark-haired woman, a noble one at that, always the most dangerous type for male vanity. The women closed in, scenting the rise of jealousy like blood in the water. "Of course," Mrs. Mason said cheerfully, "we don't mean anything by it. James was probably just helping her with charitable matters." "Yes," Doris added, "or maybe she's helping him. Widows often do." Agatha fixed her with a death glare. "What widow?" "Well, she looks like one," Doris said vaguely. "One of those women who live off men. Very elegant, but you know the type. A convenient red herring, and they all clung to it with enthusiasm." Agatha abandoned the oranges, convinced they were conspiring against her, and marched to the till. She paid without looking at anyone, chin so high she risked toppling over backwards. Outside, she stopped for a slow, furious breath. James Lacey parading around with elegant widows while I'm left to face the WI jackals. She would ring him the moment she got home and demand an explanation. A calm one, of course. Perfectly calm. Back in her cottage, she seized the phone and dialed. The answering machine clicked on. "Hello, this is James Lacey. Please leave a message." Agatha hung up before the beep. Leaving a message would only make her sound desperate. She stalked around the kitchen, glaring at Hodge, who was sprawled across her favourite chair as if claiming diplomatic immunity. All afternoon she stewed. She tried cleaning but ended up polishing the same table twice. She tried reading but couldn't concentrate on a single sentence. She tried making a cup of tea but managed only to burn her tongue. When the phone finally rang, she nearly knocked over the kettle in her haste to reach it. "Agatha Raisin," she said, attempting a smooth tone. "Agatha, it's Bill." Her irritation dipped into something like relief. "Oh, Bill, hello. Is this about James?" "No," Bill said carefully. "I'm afraid not. Something else." He paused. "A woman was found dead in a tea room in Mercester this afternoon." Agatha gripped the receiver. "Dead? How?" "Looked like natural causes at first. Heart failure. Middle-aged woman, well-dressed, gentle sort. But the staff said she'd seemed perfectly fine earlier, sitting alone, waiting for someone who never arrived." A chill ran through Agatha. "Waiting for someone?" "Yes. They found a single cup of tea untouched. She'd ordered it for two." Bill hesitated, then added, "Her name was Verity Montfort." Agatha's breath caught. "Montfort? The charity woman?" "You've heard of her?" Agatha wished she hadn't. "A rumour. Shop chatter, nothing more." "Well, she did have a heart condition," Bill said, "but the timing is odd, and she'd written down an appointment in her diary. Just initials, but still." "Initials?" Agatha whispered. "What initials?" "J.L." Silence filled the line like a heavy fog. Bill continued gently. "Now, before you imagine anything—" "I am imagining nothing," Agatha snapped, imagining everything. "She might have used false initials for privacy," Bill said, "or they could belong to someone we haven't traced yet." Agatha barely heard him. Her mind spun with images of James, purposeful and evasive, leaving her to face the WI while he kept a secret appointment in Mercester with a woman who died waiting for him. Bill cleared his throat. "We're treating it as natural causes for now, but we'll look into the diary. I thought you'd want to know." "Yes," Agatha murmured. "Thank you, Bill." When she hung up, she stood very still in the centre of her kitchen. The receiver dangled from her hand, but she barely felt its weight. A slow, queasy realization crept through her. Cold and certain. James's other appointment had not been business. It had not been innocent. It had not even been merely humiliating for her. He had been planning to meet a woman who was now dead, and he had not told her a word. Her knees felt unsteady, so she leaned against the counter. Hodge padded in, tail high, and brushed against her ankles. She didn't move. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. Agatha swallowed hard. "Oh, Hodge, what on earth has James done now?" Hodge let out a small chirp, hopped onto a chair, and curled up with the serene indifference of a creature who knew mysteries would come whether humans invited them or not. Agatha stared at him, dread and fury tightening in her chest. Then she set the receiver back in its cradle with a decisive click. Whatever James had been mixed up in, she would find out, and she would not let the village get there before her, not this time. Hodge stretched, yawned, and blinked at her. "Don't look so relaxed," she told him. "We've a dead woman, a secret appointment, and a lying man on our hands, but Hodge merely rolled onto his side, claiming the last word by falling instantly asleep. The next morning, Agatha had barely swallowed her first mouthful of tea when a knock came at the door. "Don't loom like that, Bill. You look as if you're here to tell me my chimney's fallen in." Agatha stood aside to let him into the cottage, annoyed that she sounded so openly anxious. She had opened the door expecting Mrs. Bloxby with a casserole, not Bill Wong wearing his polite but serious expression that Carsley residents recognised as code for something nasty as afoot. Bill stepped inside, brushing past Hodge, who immediately wound himself around his ankles with shameless enthusiasm. "Morning, Agatha. I'm not looming. I'm just here." "People who say they're just here are never just here," Agatha retorted. "Sit down before Hodge trips you." Bill obeyed, perching neatly on the edge of the armchair. Hodge sprang into his lap as though the arrangement had been pre-agreed. Agatha, flustered, busied herself with the teapot, rattling cups louder than necessary. "I suppose," she said, "you've come about that poor woman in Mercester. Dead over a cup of tea. Shocking!" Bill cleared his throat. "Yes, it's becoming more complicated." Agatha froze mid-pour. "Complicated how?" "The post-mortem came back early." Bill hesitated, then said, "It wasn't simple heart failure. It looks like an overdose of digitalis, prescription strength." Agatha placed the teapot down with a clatter. "Digitalis? That's what she took for her heart, isn't it? So someone gave her too much of it." Bill stroked Hodge, who was purring like a small engine. "Possibly. Or she took too many herself, but the pathologist thinks the dosage was unlikely to be accidental." Agatha sat opposite him, heart thudding. She tried for a calm tone and failed. "And this Verity Montfort, you learned more about her?" "Yes. She was waiting for someone. Tea-room staff said she kept glancing at the door, telling them she expected an old friend." Agatha leaned forward. "Which old friend?" Bill shifted. Her diary noted the meeting. She'd written the initials JL beside the time. The room fell still. Even Hodge paused mid-purr. Agatha whispered, "James Lacey." Bill nodded tightly. "We contacted him last night. He admitted he'd arranged to meet her." Agatha felt heat rise under her collar. "And didn't tell me? Didn't tell you? Didn't tell anyone?" "He said he lost his nerve and didn't go." Bill grimaced. "He only told us after we confronted him with the diary." Agatha shot to her feet. "Lost his nerve? What absolute rot! James never loses his nerve. He just pretends he's above having one in the first place." "Agatha," Bill said gently, "he's shaken and embarrassed. He didn't want you dragged into it." "Well, I'm dragged," she snapped. "Neck deep." Bill lifted Hodge off his lap to stand. "I didn't want to upset you, but I thought you'd rather hear it directly." "Thank you," she said stiffly. "I'll get to the bottom of it, one way or another." When Bill left, Agatha paced the kitchen with a fury that made her heels click like rifle shots. James had withheld the truth, again, and now there was a dead woman with his initials in her diary. She snatched up the phone and stabbed Charles's number. "Agatha, my dazzling beacon of morning doom," Charles drawled. "To what do I owe the disturbance?" "I need a lift," she said. "Now." "Is this about James?" "This is about murder," Agatha replied, and enjoyed the startled choke on the other end. 20 minutes later, Charles pulled up in his old convertible, scarf fluttering like a victory flag. "Get in, darling. You look ready to eviscerate someone. Preferably not me." "Drive," Agatha ordered, sliding in, "to the tea room in Mercester." Charles glanced sideways as he manoeuvred onto the road. "Does this involve poisoning?" "Yes." "Oh, good. Something traditional." Agatha refused to smile. The tea room was a genteel place with lace curtains, mismatched china, and the persistent smell of fruitcake. The manager, a dignified woman with a bun so tight it achieved structural integrity, approached them warily. "We're not here to cause trouble," Agatha said crisply. "Just a few questions about Mrs. Verity Montfort." The manager sighed, leading them to a corner table. Such a sad business. She sat right there, you know, quiet as you please, even commented on how lovely the scones looked, but she didn't eat a thing. Agatha scanned the room, picturing Verity waiting, checking her watch, glancing at the door. Did she speak to anyone before she collapsed? "She used the phone," the manager replied. "Told someone, today it must be settled. Sounded calm but determined. Charles raised an eyebrow. Settled? Not exactly light tea-room chat. And, the manager continued reluctantly, she had a handbag with her. Police took it, but they left her other things at the back. Agatha's pulse quickened. Show me. The manager hesitated, then waved them to a small side counter where a neat collection of Verity's personal effects sat in a cardboard box. Agatha lifted a charity leaflet, tasteful, earnest, decorated with little Union Jacks. Fund for Injured Servicemen, she read, Mercester Branch. Verity's name appeared at the bottom beside that of a young organizer, Tamsin Reed. A hurried note scrawled in Verity's looping handwriting ran down the margin. Check accounts before signing. Clue. Loud, fair, unmistakable. Charles peered over her shoulder. Oh dear, money trouble in a charity. Who could have predicted such originality? Agatha ignored him. This means something. Verity was suspicious. She was on the verge of signing something, perhaps transferring funds. The tea-room waitress wandered past and paused. Oh, that leaflet. She kept it with her at all times, and she had a row with that solicitor last week. What's his name? Lionel Tuck. Charles brightened. A cross solicitor? How deliciously cliché. The waitress nodded earnestly. They were arguing about money and promises, I think. Sounded heated. A perfect red herring, delivered with the eager cooperation of the British service industry. Agatha gathered her bag. Thank you, that's all we need. Outside, Charles said lightly, So, a jealous widow? A crooked solicitor? A trembling charity worker? Or our dear, secretive James? Don't, Agatha snapped. Charles smirked. Touchy. She halted on the pavement, fists clenched. If James is mixed up in this, we will uncover the truth. And when we do, I will either clear him or kill him. Do warn me before you decide which, Charles murmured. All right, she said darkly. I'll send a fax. He laughed. She didn't. On the drive back, Agatha stared ahead, anger settling into something sharper. She would not let gossip eat James alive. That privilege, when deserved, belonged to her alone. Back in her cottage, the kettle clicked as it finished boiling. Hodge padded from the sitting room, tail high, and nudged her ankle as if urging patience. Agatha leaned against the counter. Oh, Hodge, James Lacey, secrets, poison, and now charity accounts. Why can't life ever be simple? Hodge gave a soft, questioning chirp, then stretched luxuriously, claiming his usual spot by the fire, a reminder that at least someone in the household understood priorities. Agatha exhaled slowly. The kettle sighed with her, its steam curling gently upward. Tomorrow, she decided, she would start digging. Someone knew why Verity died, and Agatha Raisin intended to know it first. Don't you dare shed one more bit of fur on me, Agatha hissed at Hodge, brushing at her cardigan as she hurried toward the W.I. Hall. Hodge ignored her entirely, trotting ahead with the serene confidence of a creature who assumed all buildings existed for his inspection. Agatha followed, heart pounding with a blend of determination and dread. She had overslept after a night spent replaying Verity Montfort's last hours and James's silence. Now she was late, flustered, and wearing a cardigan that, despite vigorous brushing, still bore unmistakable traces of Hodge's affection. The W.I. Hall was already in full W.I. chaos again, chairs scraping, kettles rattling, and the same thick air of baking and mutual judgment Agatha had suffered the night James failed to appear. Doris Simpson's voice rose above the din. These scones are underdone, Mavis. I told you to turn the tray halfway. They are rustic, Doris, Mavis snapped. Not everything needs to be baked to death. Agatha swept inside, hoping to slip into a seat unnoticed. No such luck. As soon as she crossed the threshold, a ripple of delighted whispers spread like the rustle of a scandalized curtain, and there, at the back of the hall, stood Bill Wong, an unmistakable beacon of intrigue. Bill raised a hand in greeting, cheeks reddening under the weight of 40 women's speculative stares. He held a stack of crime prevention leaflets, but the expression on his face suggested he wished devoutly to prevent this crime of being ogled. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Bill, what are you doing here? Official visit, he murmured. Leaflets, community patrols. Rubbish, she muttered. You've thrown chum to sharks. The nearest cluster of W.I. ladies leaned forward, eager as spaniels. Agatha, dear, Mrs. Mason cooed, We were just talking about Verity Montfort. Terrible tragedy. Doris chimed in. And to think she visited our WI last month. She sat right at the back while you made that marvellous speech about village unity. Agatha blinked. Verity attended our meeting? Oh yes, Mavis said. She came with that sweet girl, Tamsin Reed. You were in rare form that day. James greeted Verity outside the hall afterwards. Very friendly. A spark, some said. A murmur rippled through the room, anticipatory, scandalous, triumphant. Agatha's throat tightened. A spark, she repeated sharply. Well, Mrs. Mason said coyly, a gentleman may find certain women interesting, especially elegant women. Doris added with relish. And she was elegant. Dark hair, good posture, nice shoes. Very London. Agatha resisted the urge to fling a scone at her, hardly proof of anything. But the women were off, embroidering their recollections with increasing enthusiasm. I heard them talking earnestly about something important, someone offered. Yes, another chimed in. Old sins and debts, I think. Quite dramatic. Agatha's heart lurched. Old sins and debts? That sounded appallingly romantic. And James, with his stiff upper lip and tragic silences, would be exactly the type to have some smouldering wartime connection with an elegant charity woman. She snapped. You all have overactive imaginations. Doris huffed. We only repeat what we hear. Which is half invented, Agatha said, and usually wrong. Before the argument could escalate, Mrs. Blocksby glided forward like a balm in human form. Ladies, she said gently, we mustn't speculate too wildly. Grief is a complicated thing. The room deflated slightly, chastened enough to behave, but still buzzing with an undercurrent of gossip. Mrs. Blocksby turned to Agatha with her usual kind eyes. Agatha, dear, may I have a word? They stepped aside. Mrs. Blocksby lowered her voice. I didn't want to mention it earlier, but Verity did speak to me after that meeting. Agatha's pulse thudded. About James? Mrs. Blocksby nodded. She asked whether he was a man who kept his word, very politely, but with a certain weight. And she asked about the village's temperament, whether we were quick to judge if awkwardness arose over money matters. A clue, delivered as delicately as a teacup on lace. Agatha felt her jealousy flare again, tempered now with sharp curiosity. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I didn't want to trouble you unless it mattered, Mrs. Blocksby said gently. Now, I fear it does. Agatha pressed her lips together. Thank you, truly. But before she could retreat to digest this, Doris called out, Agatha, dear, since you're so close to Bill, perhaps you know whether James is in trouble. Agatha stiffened. Close to Bill? Oh, everyone knows you're helping him, Mavis said brightly. You practically solved that biscuit burglary scandal 2 years ago. Bill turned scarlet. Ladies, please. Agatha seized the moment, wounded pride surging like a battle cry. Well, since the village insists on dragging me into this, I'll say it plainly. Yes, I am assisting the police with their inquiries. Gasps fluttered across the hall. Bill choked. Charles, who had slipped in unnoticed, carrying a paper bag of pastries, leaned against the wall and grinned as though watching excellent theatre. Agatha continued, voice icy with dignity. Naturally, Bill consults me. We work closely on these matters. I have insights he finds helpful. Oh, absolutely, Doris breathed, thrilled. How marvellous! Bill opened his mouth, but Charles stepped forward and clapped him on the shoulder. Let the lady have her moment, Bill. After the meeting dispersed, with at least 6 versions of James and Verity's torrid past circulating, Agatha escaped the hall before anyone else could corner her. She strode home, breath tight, cardigan still spotted with rebellious cat fur. As soon as she entered her cottage, she sank onto the sofa, deflating like a punctured souffle. Hodge immediately leapt onto her chest, presenting his whiskers for worship. Oh, Hodge, Agatha groaned, stroking him with half-hearted affection. Your mother is a fool. Hodge purred as if to say she was his favourite fool, which softened her enough to stop sulking for 10 consecutive seconds. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Agatha groaned again. If that's Doris, I'm pretending to have died. She opened the door to Mrs. Blocksby holding a casserole. Chicken, dear. Comfort in a dish. Agatha blinked, throat unexpectedly warm. Oh, thank you. Mrs. Blocksby stepped inside. Agatha, you must be careful. Jealousy is a strong lens. It can distort what you see. Agatha bristled defensively, then sighed. I know, but James kept things from me. Important things. Sometimes people keep things because they're afraid, Mrs. Bloxby said gently, not because they mean harm. Agatha looked away. Well, he can keep on being afraid. I'm not calling him back until I know more than he does. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a warm smile before leaving. Just promise me you'll be kind to yourself. Agatha shut the door behind her and leaned against it. Hodge watched from the sofa, tail swishing with feline judgment. Don't start, she told him. You'd lie too if you were James Lacey. Hodge stretched luxuriously, utterly unbothered. Agatha drifted into the kitchen. The answering machine was blinking. She pressed play. James's voice came out clipped and tense. Agatha, call me when you can. Oh, I can, she muttered. I simply won't. Hodge padded in and sat at her feet, warm and solid. She reached down to scratch behind his ears. Until I know everything, Hodge, she whispered. Every last secret. Hodge responded with a low, approving purr, the most unconditional support she would receive all day. Hodge, for heaven's sake, come out of there! Agatha's voice echoed sharply down the hallway, her patience eroding by the second. The airing cupboard door rattled as she tugged it open, revealing only towels and a single stripy cattail disappearing deeper into the shadows. From behind her, a familiar voice said stiffly, He never liked me. Agatha spun. James Lacey stood in her doorway, looking older, tenser, and far more uncertain than any memory she held of him. His posture, normally military straight, seemed reluctant, as though the air itself resisted supporting him. And for good reason, Agatha snapped. You pick the worst possible days to appear. Hodge knows it. I know it. The entire village knows it. James swallowed. Agatha, may I come in? She folded her arms. Depends. Are you planning to vanish again halfway through our conversation? He flinched at the barb. No. I came to explain myself. Miracles do happen, she muttered, stepping aside. Fine, but don't expect flattery. They moved into the sitting room, where the cushions still bore the faint imprint of last night's sulk. Agatha planted herself in an armchair. James remained standing until she gestured curtly toward the opposite seat. Hodge reappeared at last, only to shoot James a disdainful glare before leaping onto Agatha's lap with pointed loyalty. Well, she said, stroking Hodge with commanding briskness, start explaining. James clasped his hands. I didn't intend to drag you into this. You did that the minute you lied, she shot back. Verity Montfort wrote your initials. She waited for you. Then she died, and you had an appointment you conveniently forgot to mention. He closed his eyes briefly. I didn't forget. I panicked. Agatha stared at him. You? Panic? That's new. He exhaled. Verity Montfort wasn't a secret lover. She was a nurse, my nurse, in Cyprus, after the Cairo operation went wrong. Agatha blinked. You never told me any of this. James winced. I don't like discussing the past, especially that period. Well, now you must. He nodded, resigned. One of our interpreters was accused of leaking intelligence. His name was Demos. Good man. I never believed he'd betrayed us. But the army needed someone to blame. Then a mission failed. Men died, and Deimos was held responsible. Agatha's irritation faltered, replaced by a quick, piercing pity she immediately masked. And Verity nursed you afterwards? Yes, she knew Demos. She knew he wasn't capable of treachery. She fought hard for his case, but no one listened then. James rubbed his forehead. But recently she'd uncovered information that might clear him. She contacted me months ago. I didn't respond. She contacted me again a week ago. I still didn't respond. And then she said she needed to speak to me urgently. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Urgent enough to drag you to a tea room? He hesitated. Urgent enough that she'd arranged to confront someone connected to the charity, someone she believed was abusing the trust of wounded men. She wanted my support. Agatha leaned forward, tension pricking her. Who? Lionel Tuck? I don't know, James admitted. She didn't say. She only insisted I attend, that my presence mattered. But I hate public confessions, Agatha. I hate anything involving emotional spectacle. Agatha scoffed. It wasn't a spectacle. It was a woman asking for help. I know. His voice cracked barely enough to notice, except that Agatha always noticed. That's why I panicked. I thought if I didn't go, it would all fade. Old ghosts. Old mistakes. Instead, Agatha said coldly, she died waiting for you. He looked stricken. I never imagined, never dreamed she was in danger. The guilt is unbearable. Agatha pursed her lips, though her anger softened at the edges. She hated seeing him vulnerable. It made compassion creep in where fury should live. James reached into his jacket and produced a folded letter. This arrived 2 mornings before her death. I didn't show it to the police yet, but you should see it. Agatha unfolded the paper. Verity's handwriting looped with urgent conviction. Someone is abusing the trust of wounded men. I cannot ignore it. I need you beside me, James. We must do what's right. You know why. The accountant's report confirms everything. Meet me on Wednesday. With affection, Verity. Agatha's stomach tightened. Affection? James grimaced. She wrote that to everyone she'd ever tended. It meant nothing romantic. Of course, Agatha said archly. Nurses and officers, completely innocent combination. He bristled. Don't be absurd. Verity and I had professional respect, that's all. Agatha sniffed. You sound defensive. I am defensive, he admitted. You're implying things that never happened. She folded the letter sharply. I'm implying nothing. I'm merely observing. Before he could retort, the phone rang. Agatha grabbed it with relief. Yes? Bill's weary voice crackled through. Agatha, is James with you? Yes, she said, too briskly. James mouthed, what does he want? Bill cleared his throat. The toxicology report is final. It wasn't accidental. We need James to come in again. Today. Agatha felt James wilt beside her. Is this necessary? She demanded. I'm afraid so, Bill replied. New details require follow-up. Details meaning you think he did it? Agatha snapped. Details meaning we're being thorough, Bill said diplomatically. Please bring him in. Agatha hung up with a scowl. You heard him. James stood slowly. Thank you for letting me explain. She rolled her eyes. I haven't forgiven you. No, he said quietly. But you listened. He walked to the door. Agatha followed, watching him descend her little garden path with a slumped resignation she had never seen in him. It unnerved her. James Lacey never slumped. She shut the door, the latch clicking with soft finality. Hodge padded from the airing cupboard, shaking dust from his whiskers like a cat emerging from emotional exile. Agatha scooped him up, hugging him despite his indignant chirp. I know, Hodge, I know. He's infuriating, secretive, stubborn, and now the police want him again. Hodge head-butted her chin with solemn importance. Agatha carried him to the sitting-room window. She parted the curtains just enough to see James walking slowly back to his own cottage, shoulders heavy, steps dragging. Fear pricked beneath her ribs. Small, sharp, unwelcome. He might be arrested, she whispered, stroking Hodge for comfort she pretended not to need. And I'm afraid, Hodge, terribly afraid. Hodge purred, pressing against her cheek, anchoring her in a way words never could. The kettle sighed quietly in the background, as if offering its own small sympathy. Agatha closed the curtains, squared her shoulders, and murmured, They won't take him down without going through me first. Hodge blinked approvingly, and Agatha, despite everything, felt a resolve settle inside her, warm, fierce, and unmistakably hers. Your lipstick is too sharp for a family visit, Charles remarked as Agatha dabbed at her mouth with unnecessary force. It's dignified, she snapped. When dealing with resentful sisters, one must project authority. Charles murmured. Or menace. Agatha slammed the passenger door of his convertible harder than intended. Just drive. Charles eased them out of Carsley with amiable unconcern, scarf fluttering behind him like a man on holiday rather than a chauffeur embroiled in murder inquiries. Agatha sat rigidly, arms folded, rehearsing clever remarks she would probably forget the moment Margaret Hales opened her door. Hodge had tried to follow her out of the house, trotting determinedly after her until she steered him back inside with promises of leftover casserole. She wished she could bring him. He had a talent for detecting character flaws with ruthless accuracy. You're scowling, Charles observed. I'm thinking. That explains the faint smell of burning. She ignored him. If Verity changed her will, Margaret might have had motive. People do foolish things about money. People do foolish things about a great deal, Charles said lightly. Some even investigate murders for men who refuse to call them back. Agatha stiffened. "That is not why I'm doing this." "Of course," he said. "Pure justice, no emotional undertones whatsoever. I'll jump out of this car." He chuckled and shifted gears. "And yet, here you remain." Evesham's outskirts loomed, a mix of tidy semis and shops, pretending not to struggle. Charles pulled into a narrow street lined with nearly identical houses. Small gardens, neat hedges, windows dressed in curtains with dreams beyond their means. "Number 12, Agatha said, peering. "There, with the sulking geranium." Charles parked. "Ready?" No. She got out anyway. Margaret Hales opened the door after a suspiciously long wait, as though deciding whether the visitors were worth permitting onto her linoleum. She was smaller than Verity, sharper at the edges, with a face that had learned disappointment early and practiced it often. "Yes?" Margaret's tone suggested most callers were nuisances she suffered out of spite rather than courtesy. Agatha straightened. "Mrs. Hales, my name is Agatha Raisin. This is Mr. Charles Fraith. We're making inquiries about your sister Verity." Margaret blinked at them with narrow, guarded eyes. "Of course. Everyone wants something from Verity now she's dead. Come in." She led them into a cramped sitting room where the furniture looked chosen for durability rather than delight. A half-finished jigsaw lay on the coffee table beside a mug with yesterday's tea ring around its rim. "Sit if you must," she said, perching on a dining chair. "But I don't know much. Verity kept her saintly life to herself." "Saintly?" Agatha repeated. Margaret's lip curled. "Oh, yes. Everyone adored Verity. Always so helpful, so generous, so capable. Meanwhile, some of us had actual responsibilities, children, bills, an unreliable husband." Charles cast Agatha a look that said, "Here it comes." "We understand," Agatha said diplomatically. "Family dynamics can be complicated." "Complicated?" Margaret barked a humourless laugh. "She cut me out of her will. That's more than complicated. That's betrayal." Agatha felt a jolt. "You knew she changed it?" "Found out yesterday from the solicitor," Margaret said bitterly. "Left a tidy sum to that blasted serviceman's charity, as if they need the money more than her flesh and blood." "Lionel Tuck handled the will?" Charles asked mildly. Margaret sniffed. "Him. Smug man. Didn't even try to hide how pleased he was. Verity always did like important, respectable types." "Do you know why she changed her will?" Agatha pressed. "She said it was the right thing." Margaret's voice dripped acid. "But she didn't explain. Never explained anything. Just waltzed through life being admired." Agatha glanced at the cramped room, the peeling paint, the mismatched chairs, and felt a flicker of sympathy she tried quickly to extinguish. Sympathy muddied judgment. Margaret shuffled through a pile of papers on the side table, muttering curses about clutter. "Some nurse she was. Couldn't even keep her own notes in order. I was sorting these for the solicitor when you turned up." A handwritten draft caught Agatha's eye, ink dense with urgency. She plucked it from the pile before Margaret could object. "May I?" Margaret waved irritably. "If it gets you out sooner." Agatha read aloud softly. "Tamsin, I am deeply troubled by recent discrepancies. Bring the full ledgers to our meeting. Lionel insists on keeping some matters in-house, but this must be addressed properly." Charles whistled quietly. "That sounds rather damning." Agatha's pulse quickened. Verity intended to confront someone, with evidence. Margaret folded her arms. Verity intended many things. She was always interfering. Agatha looked up sharply. "Interfering how?" "In people's lives," Margaret snapped, "doing everything her way, expecting gratitude. If I'd known she was changing her will, I might have—" She broke off, colouring. "Oh, never mind. I'm upset. You can hardly blame me." Agatha leaned forward. "You might have what?" Margaret stiffened. "Said something. Tried to persuade her. I didn't mean anything else." The retraction was quick, too quick to sound innocent. Margaret's resentment lay thick in the air, heavy with years of being overshadowed by a sister who glowed more brightly. "Mrs. Hales," Agatha said gently, "did Verity mention discomfort with the charity's finances?" Margaret shrugged. "She suspected something. Always chasing justice. Tiresome trait. I told her to leave it alone, but Verity loved a cause. Loved saving people." "Did she seem frightened?" "Frightened?" Margaret considered. "No, determined. But she did fuss over papers last week. Said she'd written to that Tamsin girl insisting on an urgent meeting. never posted the letter. Agatha folded the draft carefully. A clue. Strong, clear, impossible to ignore. Charles asked quietly, "Where were you the day Verity died?" Margaret bristled. "At home, with my son. You can ask the neighbours." "Of course," Agatha said quickly, though she filed the remark away. The resentment, the financial pressure, the admission she might have acted foolishly. Margaret fit neatly inside a suspicious silhouette. Too neatly, perhaps. Margaret rose abruptly. "If you're finished, I have work. We all don't have time to gallivant around solving mysteries." Agatha ignored the sting. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Hales." Margaret nodded, eyes sharp. "If you find out why she changed that will, I'd appreciate knowing." Eager curiosity replaced bitterness for a fleeting second, then vanished behind the habitual armour of grievance. Charles and Agatha stepped back into the daylight. "Well," Charles said cheerfully, "that was invigorating. Nothing like family resentment to warm the soul." Agatha exhaled heavily. She hated Verity. "Jealousy," Charles said. "Ancient, reliable motive." "Tempting," Agatha murmured, "but too obvious. And I refuse to believe Margaret has the organisational skills to plan a poisoning. She struggles with paper piles, never mind digitalis dosages." "Some would call that discriminatory," Charles teased. "Some," Agatha retorted, "should drive and keep quiet." They returned to Evesham's Market Square and slipped into a modest cafe, the type where sausage rolls glisten under fluorescent lights and tea is poured with world-weary efficiency. Charles ordered lunch, managing to charm the waitress into giving them the fresher batch of scones. Agatha nursed her tea with restless fingers. "So," Charles said, biting into a sandwich, "do you think Margaret could have tampered with Verity's medication? Digitalis is easily misused." Agatha shook her head. "She resented Verity, yes. She needed money, yes. But she didn't radiate cunning. She radiated frustration. Verity's coat alone probably cost more than Margaret's weekly budget. That sort of difference creates anger, not poison plots." "Envy can be a potent ingredient," Charles mused. "People snap." "True," Agatha admitted. "But Margaret didn't strike me as capable of subtlety. Poisoners are subtle." "Oh," Charles said lightly. "And you're now an expert?" "I have lived in Carsley for years," she replied crisply, "and half the village bakes. Anyone who bakes well knows dosages." Charles laughed. "Your logic terrifies me." Agatha stared into her tea, her mind circling the same vexing thought. Lionel Tuck had handled Verity's will. Lionel Tuck insisted on keeping charity matters in-house. Lionel Tuck had argued with Verity. "Everything leads back to him," she muttered. "That," Charles said, "is because you dislike him. Personal bias, darling." "I dislike many people," Agatha snapped. "Not all are potential murderers." Charles leaned back. "I concede the point." As they finished their lunch, Agatha felt the weight of the day settle. Resentment in a small semi, grief disguised as anger, a draft letter that should have been sent, and a woman who died before she could confront the truth. "We're missing something," Agatha murmured. "We usually are," Charles agreed. On their way back to the car, Agatha spotted a red phone box, one of the old ones, stubbornly clinging to existence. "Stop," she said abruptly. "I need to ring Bill." Charles shrugged. "As you wish. I'll wait in the car and contemplate the futility of life." Agatha stepped inside the booth, the door screeching in protest. She fed coins into the slot and dialed Bill's direct line. He picked up after 2 rings. "Bill Wong." "It's me," Agatha said. "I've spoken with Verity's sister. There's something you need to know." She relayed Margaret's resentment, the changed will, the draft letter, the mention of discrepancies, Lionel's insistence on secrecy. Bill listened, sighing often. "Thank you, Agatha. This helps paint a fuller picture." "Good," she said briskly. "Now tell me what you're not telling me." Silence. Then Bill said, carefully, "James's alibi is inconsistent." Agatha's stomach dropped. "Inconsistent how?" "He wasn't where he claimed for part of the afternoon, and until we clarify it, he is considered a person of interest." Agatha gripped the receiver. "Bill, he didn't kill her." "I'm not saying he did," Bill replied gently, "but I must follow procedure." "Procedure be damned," Agatha whispered fiercely. "James isn't a murderer." A pause. "We'll see," Bill said quietly. "Thank you for calling." He hung up. Agatha closed her eyes, dread pulsing through her like a slow, cold tide. She stepped out of the phone box to find Charles watching her from the car. "Well?" he asked. Agatha swallowed. "James's alibi is shaky. He's now a suspect." Charles swore softly. "Oh, Agatha." She squared her shoulders, voice tight but resolute. "We're not done. Not by a long shot." At home later, Hodge curled on her lap as she sank into her armchair. His small, steady weight anchored her as the kettle sighed in the kitchen. Agatha stroked his fur, whispering, "They won't pin this on James. I won't let them." Hodge opened one golden eye, unimpressed but loyal. In that quiet, domestic moment, fear flickered at the edges of her determination, but so did resolve. "Stop fidgeting, Charles. You look like a bored adulterer at a church service." "I am bored," Charles muttered. "And adulterers usually have more interesting things to think about than charity meetings." "Behave," Agatha hissed, tugging him toward the door of the Mercester Church Hall. "We need everyone in one room. That makes people careless." Charles sighed as she pushed open the heavy door. Heat did not so much fill the room as avoid it out of spite. A feeble radiator clanked in protest, while the smell of instant coffee, cheap biscuits, and damp coats mingled into a scent that declared moral earnestness louder than any sermon. Tamsin Reed, wearing another aggressively homemade jumper, fluttered at the front like a colourfully knitted sparrow. Lionel Tuck loomed beside her, with the smug solemnity of a man who believed he held civilization together through paperwork. Agatha slipped into a seat at the back, Charles beside her. "Remember," she whispered, "you're a potential sponsor." "Splendid," he muttered. "I shall sponsor my escape." The meeting began with Tamsin's forced brightness. "Thank you all for attending. We'll start with updates on the Verity Montfort Trust and then move to planning the spring lecture, once we decide whether to proceed." A chorus of throat-clearing followed. People shifted, preened, and nodded with exaggerated importance. Agatha watched them through narrowed eyes, amused and irritated in equal measure. "A cat at a mouse convention," Charles whispered. "Exactly," Agatha murmured. Mr. Quill, a thin, sharp-faced man whose default setting was outrage, raised his hand. "Before anything else, I must say what everyone is thinking. Outsiders like Verity come in, rearrange everything, stir up trouble, and then vanish. It's disruptive." Tamsin stiffened. "Verity did not vanish, Mr. Quill. She passed away." "Well, yes, but she still left us with chaos," he snapped. Agatha leaned toward Charles. "Puces like that shouldn't be allowed near committees." Mr. Quill flushed deeper, the alarming shade of an overripe beet. Lionel cleared his throat, performing gravitas. "Let us remain civil. The trust must be handled with respect and transparency." Agatha snorted before she could stop herself. Lionel shot her a glare. Charles covered his mouth, pretending to cough. When the discussion turned to finances, tension in the hall sharpened like a badly tuned violin. Agatha raised her hand with faux innocence. "As a potential sponsor, may I ask how we intend to honour Verity's intentions?" A murmur spread. Even Charles sat up a little straighter, enjoying the drama. Tamsin clutched her notes. "Verity wanted the funds to support injured servicemen, of course." "And she trusted you personally?" Agatha asked, voice honeyed. Tamsin flushed. "We worked closely, very closely, long hours. She was wonderful." "And her pills?" Agatha asked suddenly. "You helped her with them, didn't you?" Tamsin froze. "I occasionally passed them to her. She was hopeless with doses." The room fell silent with the thick stillness of collective curiosity. Tamsin blinked rapidly, realizing she had overshared. "I mean, she wasn't unwell exactly, just forgetful sometimes. Anyone would be tired after so much charity work." Agatha filed the clue away. Tamsin handled the pills, and she was nervous enough to fumble and reveal it. Lionel took over quickly. "This line of questioning is inappropriate." "Transparency protects us all," Agatha said sweetly, echoing the memo she'd read. Lionel's nostrils flared. Meanwhile, Mr. Quill resumed sputtering. "Well, I still say local donations should benefit locals. Why should our money be shipped off to foreign veterans? We ought to focus on Mercester's needs." Tamsin's patience finally cracked. "Because compassion doesn't stop at county borders, Mr. Quill. Verity understood that," Mr. Quill muttered darkly, banging the table so hard his instant coffee sloshed over the rim. For a moment, Agatha genuinely wondered if he might burst like an overfilled balloon. Capable of mean-spiritedness? Certainly. Murder? Possibly, she thought, amused and noting the red herring quality of the man's bluster. Throughout the argument, Agatha's eyes stayed on Tamsin, who nervously palmed a small keyring, slipping the metal ring between her fingers each time Lionel mentioned financial oversight. The gesture spoke of anxiety and fear and possibly guilt. When the meeting ended, members filtered out with the self-satisfaction of people convinced they had saved the world by rearranging the agenda. Tamsin moved briskly toward the exit, but Agatha intercepted her with the smoothness of a seasoned gossip hunter. "Tamsin, dear," Agatha said warmly, "let me give you a lift home. You look tired." Tamsin flinched. "Oh, I couldn't impose." "Nonsense," Agatha said. "You're freezing, and Charles won't mind sitting in the back." Charles's face indicated he would very much mind, but he said nothing. Outside, the sky was clear and cold, a crisp evening that lent everything a deceptive calm. Agatha ushered Tamsin into the front seat and forced Charles into the back with a triumphant smile. As they drove, Tamsin stared out of the window, shoulders tight. Agatha kept her tone gentle. "That was a difficult meeting." Tamsin let out a shaky breath. "They expect so much, and I try. Really, I do. But Verity's gone and Lionel handles all the financial matters and—" Agatha prodded lightly. "And the accounts aren't perfect," Tamsin's voice cracked. "But I've only ever done what I was told." Agatha felt a spark of triumph and pity. "Told by whom?" Tamsin clutched her keyring again. I can't say." Charles leaned forward. "Won't or can't?" Tamsin squeezed her eyes shut. "Both." Agatha sensed genuine fear. Not theatrical, not guilty. Fear of consequences, fear of authority, fear of someone with power over her. They reached Tamsin Street, a row of modest terraces softened by warm lamp glow. Tamsin scrambled out with trembling gratitude. "Please don't mention this to anyone." "Of course not," Agatha said, though they both knew she absolutely would, strategically. They watched Tamsin hurry inside, shoulders hunched. Charles slid into the front seat with a groan. "I think she's hiding something meaningful." "Obviously," Agatha said. "The girl has secrets stuffed into her like mince in a pie." "Do you believe she tampered with Verity's pills?" Charles asked softly. Agatha shook her head. "She doesn't have the nerve. She's terrified of authority. Poisoners need a certain boldness. Tamsin can barely argue with a radiator." "But she did admit to handling the pills," Charles said. "Yes," Agatha murmured. "And she handled the finances too, or at least the paperwork Lionel passed her. But the real question is whether Lionel is the spider in this web, or just another fat fly caught in someone else's threads." Charles raised an eyebrow. "A poetic metaphor, darling." She scowled. "I hate not knowing." And they drove back toward Carsley, the road stretching quietly beneath a sky full of cold stars. The world looked peaceful, indifferent to human scheming. Agatha's mind churned. Lionel's pompous evasions, Tamsin's anxiety, Mr. Quill's resentment, Margaret's bitterness, and James, caught in the centre of it all, looking more fragile than she'd ever seen him. "Someone is lying," Agatha muttered. "Several someones," Charles corrected. They reached her cottage. The windows glowed warmly, a small beacon of domesticity that irritated Agatha by being so comforting. Inside, Hodge greeted her with the offended elegance of a cat abandoned for several hours. He trotted to her, pressed his head against her shin, then turned majestically to paw at the draft letter she had taken from Margaret's paper pile. Agatha picked it up again, Verity's urgent words staring back at her. "This," she murmured, "is the next step." Hodge leapt onto the counter, curling beside the scrap with a possessiveness that made her smile despite herself. Charles yawned. "I'm off. Call me when you decide to storm another office." Agatha waved him out absently, eyes fixed on the paper. The kettle clicked and began its slow, familiar sigh. Hodge stretched luxuriously, tail flicking. Agatha whispered, "Lionel, or someone else entirely?" Hodge blinked, inscrutable as ever. But the evening felt like a turning point, quiet, cold, and full of secrets tightening into shape. "Will you stop getting under my feet?" Agatha snapped as Hodge wound a determined figure of 8 around her ankles. Hodge blinked up at her, smugly unrepentant. Agatha resumed pacing across the sitting room. It was a restless, throbbing sort of morning. Too much thinking, too little action, and her mind a dangerous place to be left unsupervised. She had pored over every scrap of the case, every hint, every conspicuous silence. But it was the draft letter in her drawer, a letter she had guiltily reread over toast, that nudged her from frustration into clarity. Bring all the ledgers. Verity had insisted on them, had even demanded Tamsin present them personally at the tea room. If Lionel had been masterminding a fraud, he would never have allowed the confrontation without gluing himself to Verity's elbow. The man was pompous, cautious, and allergic to risk. But someone young, scared, desperate, someone who thought they could tidy things later, that was another story. Someone like Tamsin. Agatha stopped pacing at once. Hodge bumped his head against her shin. Yes, she breathed. That's it. A plan, simple, direct, deliciously improper, formed instantly. She rang Tamsin before she could talk herself into a grander scheme. Tamsin dear, she purred, we really must have a quiet word. Somewhere private. How about Verity's cottage? It's important. We should discuss how best to preserve the charity's reputation. Tamsin hesitated, which told Agatha she had chosen precisely the right bait. All right, Tamsin said faintly, if it helps. It will, Agatha replied, and hung up before the girl could change her mind. She dialed Bill next. Come to Verity's cottage in an hour. Bring Charles, and behave. Agatha, what are you planning? Justice, she said, and put the receiver down firmly. Verity's cottage sat quiet and slightly dusty, like a house pausing between owners. Agatha arrived early, letting herself in with the key still entrusted to her by Verity's solicitor. Boxes lined the walls, neat, labelled melancholy. A faint lavender scent lingered, clinging stubbornly to the silence. Agatha stood in the small sitting room, hands clasped behind her back, posture sharp with impatience. You'd better talk, she muttered to the absent walls. I'm running out of polite curiosity. When the knock finally came, she opened the door to a pale, fragile-looking Tamsin clutching her handbag as if it were a life jacket. Oh, Tamsin whispered, it feels strange being here. Do come in, Agatha said. We haven't much time and there's a lot to settle. Tamsin stepped inside, eyes darting at every box. The room felt colder with her anxiety in it. Agatha gestured to the chairs. Let's get straight to it. The charity's reputation, the accounts, Lionel's role, Verity's concerns. We must understand what happened if we're going to help. Tamsin shook visibly. I told the police what I could. Yes, Agatha said softly, settling opposite her. But you didn't tell them everything. Tamsin flinched. I don't know what you mean. Agatha leaned forward. Her voice gentled, but her eyes remained sharp. Verity insisted on those ledgers. She insisted on transparency. She insisted on meeting you alone before she confronted anyone else. Why, Tamsin? Why would she choose you? Tamsin's gaze darted toward the window, toward the boxes, toward the door, anywhere but Agatha's face. I don't... You were frightened, Agatha murmured. Not of Verity, of what she would uncover. Tamsin's breath hitched. I only borrowed it, she whispered. Just borrowed. Money goes missing sometimes in admin. I thought Lionel would help me put it right. Agatha felt a grim certainty settle. How much did you borrow? Tamsin covered her face with her hands. Too much. I kept meaning to fix it, but the figures, they got away from me. Verity saw it first. She asked questions. She said she would bring an independent auditor. She said she would bring James in too as a figurehead. And that, Agatha said coolly, would have ended everything. Tamsin nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. She wasn't angry. That made it worse. She said I was young, that mistakes could be corrected, that honesty would free me. Agatha breathed out slowly. And you panicked. I didn't mean to hurt her, Tamsin burst out. I just wanted time. She always took the same heart pills. She kept both the old prescription and the new one in her handbag. I thought, if she looked a bit faint, if she couldn't start the meeting yet, I could talk to her, I could explain. Agatha's voice remained very calm. So you swapped the bottles? Tamsin nodded miserably. Just for an hour. Just long enough to apologize. I thought James would be there. She wouldn't make a scene with him watching.